totally appreciate. Ooh, recording in progress. I thank you everybody for joining in, and also thank you so much to the people who are giving us their expertise. We really, really appreciate it. This is really a great way for all of us. I can't even believe that we can do this now, that like Zoom is just like normal. But it is a great way for those of us who are in so many different places to be able to be able to share our information, especially those of us who are in rural communities and who are farmers. We really don't get a whole lot of opportunity to be able to connect, even if we try. There are just so many other things that are taking up everybody's time. So it's really lovely to be able to have all these people from all over California tuning in. So thank you so much. I think that we are, let's see, I want to be mindful of time. So, ooh, it's only 12:01. Great. I think that we can just dive right in. We have a couple of people from the production side of things and a couple of people from the grain development side of things. And so why don't I just go ahead and introduce them. And there are a couple of people that I haven't been able to talk to about the format. So let me just introduce them, and then we'll just quickly talk about what the format's going to be and the order, and then we'll just dive right in. So on the kitchen side, we have Clemence. Is your last name Lutz?
It is now.
It is. Okay, great. Okay, so Clemence Lutz from Gourmandise School in Los Angeles. Who I met first at another local grain conference like several years ago when I was really just getting started. Avery Ruzicka, from a partner in Manresa Bread, who I had met a long time ago. She actually was baked in my bakery with my behemoth of an oven, which is just lovely to remember. And her bakery has really grown up there in Los Gatos. Thank you. And then we also have Allison, who is the small grains researcher at UC Davis. We are delighted to have. Hi, Allison. And then we have Claudia, who is the director of the California Wheat Commission. So, and thank you, farmers, for joining in. As we've discussed in email, this is a way for us just to get different opinions of different people who use and support small grains and heritage grains and local grain growing here in California, so that we can all make really good informed decisions about what we're planting this year. We have given people, we have a list of questions that Claudia has compiled that I believe everybody has, that all of our panelists have been given. Here's a little review. What are the top 3 factors that farmers should consider when choosing a grain variety? What class of wheat grows best in a region, or what are you most interested in? Let's say for the people who are in bakery production. What are the grain varieties you would suggest for SoCal? Why Sonora gets almost all the press in our region? Nate, did you write that question? What are the pros and cons of Sonora and its brand recognition? And what is a grain no one has heard of that you would like to highlight? So, you know, we have a bunch of different angles that people will be approaching this topic from. And so one of the things that I really want to do is I really want to be able for every single person, not necessarily to answer every single one of these questions, but perhaps for each person to talk about what they care about when they're talking about grain varieties that they're really interested in, to talk a little bit about their program and why they and what they're really looking for, and what their, I guess, what their needs are, or what they're looking for to the future. Another thing that I think is also really important for us for the long haul is what we see are trends now, either in baking or in grain development, and what we think will we will be looking toward in the future that might not be super evident right now, but that will probably be gaining some momentum and some traction in the future. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Great. So how should we do this? Let's just kind of come to a quick consensus here. Should we go through each of these questions, or should we just have each person speak in turn and then open up to a question and answer? kind of a little bit more free form, or one just kind of barrel down the question list one at a time?
I think it's helpful for my personal opinion. My brain would probably do better hearing everybody's answer to one question, just because like that would, I mean, that seems mentally more like it would work for me, but yeah, that's
Okay.
me.
Sounds
I
good.
think we can.
Thank you,
chime
Avery.
in.
What was that, Allison?
I think we can all just sort of chime in on the questions.
Okay,
Come up.
great. Is that all right with you, Clemence? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then Claudia, I think that was your preference as well, right?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's see. I'm just gonna, why don't I just rotate between different people going first? Okay, so let's start with Avery. What are the top 3 factors that you think that you would like to see farmers consider when choosing a grain variety?
For me, the top, we mill our own grain here. So the flavor, like having real conversations about flavor, I feel like is honestly like beyond anything else. It's not even just like top 3. It's like, that is like top number 1 to me. Because at least from my perspective of the bakeries, similar to my own, where we are buying as much as we can directly from farmers, it can still be, consistency and volume are like, I guess, the next 2 pieces. Because within the bakery, if it was just myself baking, then I could be getting different grains in each week. We could be changing things all the time. But when you have a multi-unit, location bakery with a relatively young baking team, what I want my bakers to connect with first and foremost is an understanding of the flavor of the grain, because that is like the quality and the flavor is what's coming directly from the farmer, right? And then it's our job in the bakery to highlight and work with that grain and understand its elements, its variability, but that's the bakery's job. Do you know what I mean? So I think that for me, it's like, but if I can have my employees, my team members understand that this variety of wheat or this variety of rye or whatever it might be has this type of flavor, then they approach the baking from a flavor perspective, which is what I want them to do, because everything else might change and that a lot of that's internal, how we mill things, how fine, how coarse, sifted or not. That's everything that we're doing here. So I think for me with the farmer, I would like to be able to have more conversations of like communicating with my team about what the flavor, what the expectation of a grain is going to be.
Amazing, thank you. Let's keep on with the on the production side, on the bakery production side. Clemence, how about you?
So for that question, I think I totally resonate with what Avery's saying. We are a little bit different in that we're teaching the regular consumer about whole grains. And I think everybody on this panel is like in it, like, about whole grains, you can tell the difference between spelt and Sonora, but I'm here to just like spread the word that 99.9% of the population has no idea that flowers have flavor. And so our job here is to give people like a really strong differential between reds and whites, between hard and soft. So as much as I want to see like a lot of really cool, interesting grains, I think we have so much more work to do to hit the zeitgeist and get people to understand like just the main categories and the taste and texture differential between them. So I'm like a really big proponent of, if we can get our hands on a couple of different hard whites, a couple of different hard reds, and just like our stalemates, rye, spelled, Sonora, to get people to start playing with those colors. It's kind of like the crayon box. That's what's most important to the work that we do. Is consistency is super important, like when I do large scale baking for sure. And we're not really at the point yet where we have culinary students at our local trade tech colleges who have enough kind of like where Avery was saying, enough experience to be able to make alterations on the spot, like with different hydration levels and an understanding of how to change things up at a minute. But yeah, I would say for us in the work that we do, Sonora is great because it's sort of our gateway, and I don't want to give it too much more attention, but yeah, 99.9% of the population doesn't know what Sonora is. And we want to replace all their AP flour with something like that or with spelt in their regular baking. So that's where we're coming from. And so, we're lucky that we're able to have like such a wide range of different grains that are able to grow in California, to give people that option. But that's it for us. We want a wide range, but we don't need like 30 different types of hard whites. Like, I just want to get people their hands in it, and more availability. In other words, like, we need more people to grow those categories, because we want to make it more available to the regular consumer.
Amazing. So for both of you, the flavor is number one. And then the second thing, yeah. And then the second, and then it also added into the mix are that consistency, volume. You don't want necessarily to have all of these different colors to play with, but have some different things that you can easily give as a message to these less experienced bakers that you are responsible for. Great, thank you. Allison, I'm going to ask you to talk to us from your perspective at UC Davis.
Yeah, so just for those of you that don't know what we're doing at UC Davis is we've been doing some organic wheat trials past couple years, and we're looking at landrace varieties all the way up to modern varieties from the breeding program, and we're also looking at developing some varieties. So from an agronomic perspective, you want to choose something that's adaptable to your region, that isn't too late. That's definitely for SoCal, you don't want to grow a winter wheat. I think we had an issue last year. Somebody grew a bunch of winter wheat, and I tried to warn them, and it didn't go over well. But
what was in what happened, or like what did they run up against then?
Well, so you need a winter for winter wheat.
Right.
It has like a vernalization period.
So it just didn't thrive, or
it'll just never really head out, or you won't get any grain off of it.
Okay.
So for organic farming, disease resistance. Sorry, I'm outside and people decide to do yard work. So disease resistance is important because we don't have a lot of organic fungicides or pesticides that we can use. Also, weed control, things that grow early, have early vigor. Those are some of the things we're looking at in the organic trials here. And ours here are, it's mainly for the Sacramento Valley, but we would like to expand these trials to SoCal, to other areas of the state. And so we've been working with, I think Jared's on here, the Organic Seed Alliance, as well as the Wheat Commission, to kind of figure out, agronomics, quality. Things may not yield really high, but they have a very good quality. So something like Sonora has really, really low yields, but everybody seems to really like the quality of it. Finding something for the farmer that would be a little higher yielding, I think, so it would be to their advantage for growing it and selling it. Sonora, with such low yields, you have to end up selling it for a much higher price. So that comes out of the baker's, the miller's pocket.
Got it.
I think that's all I have to add right now.
Sorry, I was on mute. So for you, Allison, it's more about adaptability to the region and appropriateness to the region, disease resistance, and all these different things also coming together for higher yield so that it actually makes it possible to grow these different grains economically possible and from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Claudia, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so with the work that we're doing with Allison, I think it's important that when farmers are looking at varieties, that they also have an understanding on the genetic side of it. And when I say that, there's certain varieties that we have seen that they are, for example, newer varieties that, you know, in a lower input scenario as organic, they perform outstanding. So that's kind of the plus of having these newer varieties. And also, you know, in general, we also notice flavor differences and changes even in the more conventional varieties that are, you know, one of the varieties that we have worked for the last couple of years, and we have seen that mainly happening with organic farmers, is a variety that is called West Brand 9229, and as well as Joaquin Oro, that it has warm spices flavors, for example. So it's not only appealing to the baker as having an interesting flavor, but also those two varieties, for example, have what I would call stable genetics, that despite where it's grown in all different areas in California, and this is something that our agronomist Mark Lundy has done with different management practices, under drought circumstances and under also nitrogen management differences, they have seen that the genetics of the quality of the gluten strength has been stable, meaning has been sustained and maintained with what a baker would like to see. But however, I do think that it's important. I think farmers get caught up a lot into what the industry wants, which usually they call for protein content. And to me, that's a set for failure to the farmer. And we shouldn't be looking, they shouldn't be looking at that as being their benchmark. But also it has to be communicated in a way to the baker that a variety that might have only 9% protein content, we have seen a variety at 9% protein content that does even better than a variety that does at 14-15% protein content. So I think a farmer should be respected by more the production side on what they're producing on the overall package, but not necessarily tagging them or tagging the wheat as being a high or low protein content until that variety has been looked at in the quality aspect to see what that variety is most suitable for. And that's the work that Allison and I were working on. And I'm happy to show you later on a little bit of that work that we're doing to be able to, for the farmer to communicate with the baker, the miller, and talking about quality in a very, very simple language.
Yes, I mean, I think that aligning, it's happened many, many times where the aligning of gluten strength and protein has been a mistake that we have had in a lot of our conversations. And it's definitely something, Claudia, that you can help us with, and something that is really terribly important for this next step of us talking about choosing our grains, is that issue of how we need to have the vocabulary that is actually appropriate. How we need to see how gluten strength may or may not be related to the protein levels. Thank you. That is really terribly useful. So for you, a lot of it really just has to do with just understanding what is out there, some of these newer varieties hit all of these different categories for the different farmers. And a lot of it is getting that information out there to the farmers so they can also maybe add some new varieties and newly developed grains to their stable that can also give them a little bit more, some more things to work with. I have been working with some Joaquin de Oro that Nate gave me, which I absolutely love. The strength is really good. The flavor is really good. I'm really looking forward to using that in some of my mixes. I am particularly excited about using it in a blend with some of the heirloom varieties to give it a little bit more complexity and also give it a little bit more of that consistency that we're looking for. Thank you. Okay. Anything else to add? Should we move on to the next question? Oh, let's move on. What class of wheat, winter, spring, hard, soft, grows best in our region and why? Okay, so this is actually really just more of an idea. And so I think I'm gonna go ahead and take this as turn it a little bit as it relates to each speaker. So really what we're doing is we're talking about the topic of winter or spring, hard or soft, and how, what each person wants to talk about within that, either from the baker's perspective or from the grain selection perspective. And so Allison, actually, why I think is a really good question for you to do first. So can you talk to us about winter and spring and hard and soft selections as they relate to Southern California and kind of Central California, which is where we are, and Central Coast?
Right. Well, yeah, like I mentioned, I'd stay away from winter wheats unless you're up in Northern California, Tule Lake region, where they have winter.
Oh, and actually, can you tell me, do you mean winter planting or just
yeah, a winter variety. So, you know, we plant in the fall here. So there's kind of a technical issue, like it's fall planted, but we fall plant spring grains here in Sacramento Valley and, you know, Southern California. Yeah, a winter variety, some years will do okay in our region. It'll be very late and not get the best sort of grain out of it. And most of the grain we grow here is hard wheats, but we're starting to look at a few soft wheats. I don't know how much interest there is in soft wheats. It's certainly something we can include more of in the trial if there's interest in this region for it. So yeah, mainly hard spring wheats is what we're growing here.
And do you find success with the softs?
So this year we had a few. So in the trials, we've been looking at some varieties from sort of the 70s, 80s that are, we're calling them ex-PVP lines. So they were previously, you know, released from seed companies, and now they're off their patent, so they're freely available to use. So we had a few two soft wheat varieties in there, and they actually did very well this year, surprisingly, with the low rainfall we got. So
amazing. Okay, now everybody wants to know which ones those are.
So there's one variety called Centennial, which is out of Idaho, and then another one called World Seeds, which came out of California in 1979. And so they didn't do great last year, but this year with the drought, they seem to hold up okay.
Wow.
So,
amazing.
So probably continue those. Yeah, and you know, we'll post once we have the rest of the data. We're still looking at we still need to do some quality analysis and stuff, but we'll be posting all the results for these lines on Mark Lundy's agronomic site, and also probably through the Wheat Commission. So if anybody has interest in testing these, I think Jared still has some seed of these, and we can also grow some more increases.
Great. Oh, will you put her Claudia, thank you so much for taking notes. We go ahead and put, there you go, you're the best.
Yeah. And then also out of you know, the UC breeding program, we have some really nice hard whites coming out of there. So if anybody wants to test some of those, I think Nan's doing some testing of one. Those would just require a test agreement, but yeah.
Great. That's fantastic. Thank you. And can you tell me also, in your experience, so this is, so not just what is being developed, but in your experience, what hard wheats have been successful in our area?
Well, like Claudia mentioned, Joaquin Oro, is a good one. A lot of people like your Curro Rojo. There's a new version of your Curro Rojo coming out that has some genes in there for striped rust resistance.
Okay.
Acceptable.
So disease resistance on the Yocora Rojo. Mhm.
Yeah. We have a really cool one called UC Amarillo that just came out. That's a yellow pigment variety that has very good baking quality to it. Claudia can probably talk more about that. Of course, I'm partial to the UC varieties, so.
Sure. Amazing. Thank you. Okay, I think you just got tossed the ball, Claudia. Do you want to talk about, you want to give your assessment of the winter versus spring, hard versus soft?
Yeah, I think Allison covered that part well. What I think I will answer more the question that you asked regarding, why like predominantly we plant and grow hard wheats in general. So California is in most of the area in California is in a weather pattern that is very different than other parts in the United States, where most of it has higher rainfall and it's more wet. And think about where wheat comes from arid places, arid meaning like dry environment. So wheat, and if you look at emmer, einkorn, those are actually hard wheats. And that's where, durum wheat comes from, the lineage of the emmer wheats. So our climate, it's perfectly suitable for growing hard wheats. It's just like the perfect, because you also have the drier climate, but you have those in general drier years that are making that grain to have higher protein depositions, which actually the protein is what creates the hardness of the kernel, whereas the starch side is what creates it to be softer. So you don't have a lot of the starch deposition, but you have more of the protein deposition in the plant and in the grain. So that's why our climate, like hard wheats, thrive in this area. Now, that doesn't mean that we cannot grow soft wheats. In fact, Sonora is a softer wheat, genetically speaking, but I have seen soft wheat, Sonora wheat being actually on the harder side because it have had a higher protein content. So just because a soft wheat, genetically speaking, is softer, depending on the growing area or how it's managed, you might be able to have something that is harder. Now, I do have to make a parenthesis here, and Jared Sistrom might be able to talk more about this because he's familiar more with that area. We do have the northern side of California, and Sacramento might be included in a higher rainfall, but definitely in the Tule Lake region, that region does grow soft wheats, but because we're concentrated on the southern side, your area definitely has been growing for years hard wheats. In fact, the very first hard white wheat that was developed in the US came from California long time ago, and it's a beautiful wheat called Classic. That was the first variety. And we were the #1 hard white wheat growing region in the whole United States. And we were the first ones to export that wheat to the UK. So we have been known to set the stage up high. The commission actually did a lot of work for doing that we used to export most of that wheat outside of the state or internationally.
Amazing. So for us, it seems like so basically from the farming perspective, it seems like the greatest amount of success historically has been in our area for hard wheats, but there are some soft varieties that are that can be successful in our area. We have some new varieties that Allison has some information about. And then we also have had some success with Sonora, but as Allison said, it is a relatively low yielding variety. And it's something that maybe we want, maybe it would be a great thing for us to do the soft wheat 2.0 movement if we do that in Southern California. But the hard wheats, we're saying, what you're saying is that has historically been a very, very successful thing for our area. And
yeah, I have to make a point. Sorry, Melissa. And something that I learned also, I know Monica's here, but something that I learned visually, observational which I'm a visual learner, from Allison when I went to see her trials at the student farm, whatever. She had Sonora grown under irrigation where she applied, and Allison, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I remember, you grew one that was no irrigating, one that was actually irrigated. So one was more on the drought. and actually Sonora. But if you think about Sonora was adapted to the desert of Mexico, right? So I think the very important key aspect of this is that these varieties have been adapted for years. And these, of course, you guys know better than I do, but I know it takes many years to be adapted to a region, that this variety thrives in a drought environment. And I think a lot of these varieties that are older, that we never done research on, and I know that's why Allison's work is so important, is that she's looking at that, like what varieties thrive in California weather that is so dry, and which ones can save money. I mean, can save money too for, inputs, but like water, like how can growers take advantage of those, right? I think that will be very important in the future.
So important. And Allison, I think you are going to be getting a lot of emails after this discussion. I see a lot of activity in the chat, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and have our other two speakers answer this question, and then I haven't been able to take a look at what's happening in the chat, but then maybe we can kind of catch up with what's happening in the chat. So let's see, how about Clemence, what would you like to talk about? You don't necessarily need to talk about growing, but how about your experience with some of these different classifications of varieties and what you would like to see?
Just looking at trends. So we can see trends based on the questions that we get on a daily basis by bakers across the country, but mostly in California. And these are consumer bakers. Very few of our customers, maybe like only 20% of them are professional, but I think that people are a little bit over the bread thing. I think we have a lot of really basic consumers who have crossed the threshold of bread baking and are really looking forward to playing with some flours on the, the pastry side of it. And that's where I think soft wheat could have a really big advantage. I think we've introduced so many hard wheats to bread bakers, right? All the sourdough people who during COVID got the bug. But this is a really good way to introduce people to whole wheat flours who are willing to pay a little bit more when they're making pastries. They're spending extra money on chocolate, on really good sugars. And I think David and I were kind of corresponding a little bit about this, just about the price differential. And I think it's hard with bread because you're used to paying a certain amount for a loaf of bread. And yeah, you could be like, oh gosh, to make this sourdough bread is going to cost me this much more. But when we're looking at pastries, and we see it when we sell the grist and toll flour in the front, there's a lot less sort of fight with the softer wheats when it comes to baking pastries. And I think there's just a really great opportunity to grow the soft wheat part of it for people who are right now buying very expensive, very not great quality soft wheat products in the grocery store, who are less cost conscious than when they're baking bread. So, so yeah, I think to see a couple more soft wheat varieties would be really interesting for us. Or who have gone on the Sonora bandwagon and are looking for something else, or just to fill that category with something. There's a lot less consciousness about cost. I don't think cost is a really big factor, everyone. If we look at the craft chocolate movement of 12, 15 years ago, nobody would have thought they'd be paying $14 for a 3-ounce bar of single origin chocolate, and they are now, and they're putting them in their cookies. And I think that we can't be so worried about that, because I have plenty of customers who don't fall in that high income category, who are willing to pay a little bit more for specialty flours because they understand why they're paying more and why it's important and the flavor got to them. So
amazing. So on the retail side, when you're talking about selling flour to your customers who have pretty much bought in to this idea of using these specialty grains or fresh milled, right? Then what you're saying is that cost is in a different category now for those retail customers.
Barrier for cost is different for breads than with pastries. So we see people doing the mental math and they're like, I got to make a loaf of bread with this hard white and the loaf is going to cost me like $4.75 to make, right? But they're like, I want to make the best chocolate chip cookie ever, the best brownie with this rye or whatever, and price isn't as big a factor. So I think I don't want anyone to be afraid of growing these specialty grains because they feel like customers are going to be afraid of the price point. Nobody in the grocery store is comparing, you know, well, grist and toll isn't available in the grocery store, but even in our shop, because we sell the central milling AP, nobody's doing the differential between them because they see them as two completely separate products.
Yes, that makes so much sense. Thank you. Okay, Avery, rounding it out.
There. Sorry. I very much agree with what you had to say there with regard to like the retail sales of flour, but as a large volume bakery, the price point for me as a independent intermediary user is very important to me. You know, we've been, I don't want, lucky's not the right word, but like because of the specificity of what we purchase, we have been seeing obviously like an increase in price, you know, but some of these emails coming through from central milling, thus far, it hasn't been any products that we personally use. We have seen some increase, but there was an email not very long ago about one of their flours going up 25%. It was going up 25%. And, you know, and it was like a very high use flour for a lot of bakeries. If we had, it completely changes, you know, what your product is. And like, while we have historically only raised our prices, like basically once, our bread went from $8 to $9 at the beginning of this year. I haven't changed my pastry prices. So from $4, you know, it's like, do I go from a $4 croissant to a $6 croissant? Because I do want to use more and more whole grains, and we're investing actually in purchasing a sifter for the bakery. So it's like, I definitely agree that if you're retail selling grains, that people are excited to buy the flour, they're not going to compare the prices. They're going to be okay paying $16 for a bag of flour, or even or $20 for a bag of flour. But if we're talking about me using these grains in my pastries, which is what I'm trying to do, you know, my goal with my business, I mean, there's a lot of struggles right now with like, we're in growth mode, but we also are struggling with staffing. And so, you know, and then we're trying to stay committed to what our goal is of high quality product where you can directly connect a variety of grain to everything we make, whether it's because it's a single, it's like our whole wheat cookie is 100% whole grain, whole wheat, or if it's because it's a percentage of something in a loaf cake. But, you know, there is, the price piece is going to be, it is a scary piece for me because I'm trying to tie my company even more to fresh farmer, you know, direct from farmer grain, but I don't necessarily have the magic ball. Like, well, I have the magic ball that everything's going to go up in price, but there is only so much that, you know, I don't want to sell a $7 croissant. That's crazy. You know, I can't sell a $7 croissant, you know? So I don't know, price is something that I would like to keep understanding more about with the farmers. And, you know, we still struggle where we are in Northern California to get a lot of grain. Like I get a lot of grain through central milling. I'd like to get more directly from farmers. We've had consistency issues with volume, not so much the product. Once we have it, we've been very happy with the product, but we need a fair amount, you know? So we just haven't been able to connect very well with, you know, Coke Farms is somebody we've worked with a lot, but then they will use up what they have and then they won't have it again, you know? And so, and then the price for them is going up and the price of delivery goes up. And then, you know, so it's, I don't know, price is a tough one for us. How do we pass on that price from a product standpoint if we're incorporating into an individual pastry, not just a bag of flour?
Right. And I think that, thank you, Avery. And I think that this actually, like, let's just stay here on this topic of price for a second. Or rather of volume, that issue of how much volume you need. So you would prefer to buy from one supplier and know that, no, you wouldn't.
No, I don't have any desire to buy from one supplier. I would rather be, I mean, grain, I would rather be working direct with the farmer. I think it's much more interesting. You have a lot more, I'd rather get the information directly from the person that was growing the product versus an intermediary salesman. Absolutely. Like I would prefer that immensely. And then understanding that story and understanding the product and understanding the flavor and understanding the life of this grain, because then that is all stuff I can pass on to my customer. And that does help me maybe with validating the price of, going from $4 croissant to a $5 croissant, because now we're actually incorporating 25%, or even if it's 11%, or maybe it's 50% because I have a sifter, but there's a real reason versus like, I don't like absorbing somebody else's inflation. The farmer, yes, but Central Milling, I would prefer not to be helping them out. I like them. They're nice people. That's not what I mean, but just like, why not help the farmer directly? Right.
Right. Yeah. And I hear what you're saying. I saw that email, the price.
I was imagining if you were, we're in the midst of trying to kind of start a secondary like brand potentially. And it's like, if you had done all of your costing based on, oh, I'm going to make a bagel and I'm going to use this flour that I'm purchasing directly. I mean, that just blew up your entire business plan. I mean, 25%. I mean, of course, the margins are not good in the baking industry.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to go to some and catch up on some of the really great things that people are saying in the chat. But first thing that I want to do before we go ahead and do that is, Avery, in terms of your purchasing of hard and soft, what's your percentage?
We use both. I really like soft wheats and actually like baking with them in bread. All of our breads are either a blend up to 100% whole grain. So, we don't make any bread that is completely sifted. And so there's, I come from more of a cooking background. So for me, grain is flavor more, and then it's about your ability to create a structure around that, or create a product where you're trying to emphasize what the character traits of this grain are, right? So like not trying to force a square peg in a round hole, but rather say like, hey, let's celebrate this in a ciabatta, or let's do this and that. So it really just depends. I mean, consistently, we definitely use more hard wheat, but it's not, that also has more to do with availability than it does necessarily desirability.
I see.
We're very open.
Can you tell me why you like using soft wheat in bread?
I mean, I think that flavors come through. I think that like for me, we're making the same, we make 5 to 6 different varieties of bread. Typically there's a lot of consistency with the product offerings that we have right now, especially with COVID and staffing and all these things. So we have our core products. And so what's interesting to me is try to continue to coax better flavor and texture without saying I'm not necessarily going tomorrow to work and making a brand new bread. I'm taking a bread we're already making and saying, how can I maybe just improve the chew or the crust? And that's where I think things like incorporating a little bit more of the soft wheat can start to add little character traits. It's kind of like adding in the details, right? It's filling in, you've created a structure, you've created an outline, and now you're kind of coloring it in. And I think that soft wheats or varieties can help with that.
I agree. The bite on soft wheat can definitely change your experience of a loaf. Yeah. For us, one of the things that I have seen, like in blending, like say Red Fife and Sonora, that those two together have this, like in my experience, I've seen those two have like this really, really lovely palette of flavor and also this really amazing texture. And I think that when you do have that ability to play with that blend, I think it can really help. Nate Siemens from Gonzalez Seaman Family Farms and Fat Uncle Farms and like a million other things here in California has been keeping up with the chat way more than I have. And so Nate, I'm going to call you in from the silent group and tell me what you're seeing in the chat. Can you update us?
I'm just going to read through them quick, if that's okay.
Great, that's perfect.
I think that otherwise, is it true that they otherwise don't get captured into the recording? That people won't be able to see the chat, right? Okay.
Yeah, right. Thanks.
Okay. David says, by
David
definition,
Keisel from
from
Cafe
KP
Mills.
Mills,
KP Mills.
Yeah. Says, by definition, performance consistency is nearly impossible to achieve across small lots of specialty grain. Would bakers prefer more blended flours to improve performance consistency, do their own blending, or just learn to work with the variability from lot to lot? Clemence responded, great point. Our work in educating consumers is to differentiate between commodity wheat, flour, purchasing, and specialty grains, and set their expectations with regards to price variability. Blending isn't helpful for the consumers because it takes away from what's unique about each grain. We compare this to single origin craft chocolate over blended varieties that offer more consistent but less unique profiles. David's response, absolutely agree with Claudia. We need to understand how to differentiate these grains and flours from commodity grains and flours, which is designed and produced to satisfy industrial buyers.
I think that was in response to when Claudia was speaking about the small grains product.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Jesse Smith chimed from White Buffalo Land Trust chimed in. I'm really interested in the different environmental and climatic influences that would influence a grain variety. So health indicators such as soil type, pH, EC, organic matter, precipitation patterns, wind impact, and grazing pressures. David Keisel chimed in. I had a good conversation with Mike Pumphrey at WSU yesterday about other non-PVP HR varieties like Hollis and Kelsey that have held up despite the drought and score well on yield and flavor baking tests. Then David said, we need to remember that not all wheat goes into bread. Soft wheats make fresh noodles and pasta, as well as pastry flour. I worry that we have certain bread obsession when it comes to breeding and growing. That was actually right before Clemence chimed in on that exact same thing. Jesse responded to David. I was wondering the same thing. The interest in both craft beer and spirits. But maybe this doesn't overlap well with the smaller scale we find in heritage organic production. David responded to Avery. Bottom line is producers need to be able to afford to produce the product wheat in competition with grapes, olives, almonds, and other crops that make it possible to make a living here in California. Starting with costs of production and reasonable margin for growers, we can pretty easily calculate costs and reasonable returns from there. I chimed in response to Avery and suggested that our Loose Grower Alliance could trial a collective grow out for her this year. That was in response to.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about that.
That is a great idea, Nate.
David put in, bear in mind that ingredient costs, flour, are based on industrial scale subsidized production costs. They're not realistic. They're not realistic, especially if you include environmental, health, carbon costs. How do we wean consumer expectations from an unsustainable model? Avery said, totally agree with you, David. I think that educating the team and consumers about true cost of production is incredibly important. And Clemence said she agrees as well. That's where we're at right now.
Thank you so much. So I think that, definitely one thing that we're faced with in terms of this larger conversation about cost is there are some areas where people are, I think no matter what, these are businesses. We have to be paying attention to cost. The cost factor is important for different, or rather is figures into it differently for the different players. Those of us who are at that, there are some of us who are at the retail point of selling flour where that cost actually is not as that cost is actually not as stressful as some people who are selling in a retail bakery. Let's see. I would love for to be able for Allison to be able to answer Jesse's question about the ecological factor of some of these grains. But maybe she can address that while we're going through some of these other questions. I can't even believe there's so much information here. Thank you guys so much for doing this. Let's move on to this third question. What are the grain varieties you would suggest for SoCal and why? I think Allison has, oh yeah, we also have this adding certain types of wheat for changing texture. I think Allison was telling us about Centennial. I wrote it down. And World Seed.
So these are just tested in the Sacramento Valley. And so one thing we're actually going to stick on after this, if anybody wants to join us, about trying to get some variety trials down in SoCal, possibly in your Nate. California has so many different climates throughout the state. It's really hard to say what does well there from testing here in the Sacramento Valley. So we really need some testing down there, whether it's on-farm testing or we can do some trials. I think that would be the biggest advantage to SoCal farmers.
Fantastic. And Claudia, what do you think? Grain varieties suggesting for SoCal?
So I have actually, I would think that in general, these varieties that we saw this year and I've seen also from another farmer that sent us samples. So just FYI, if you're a farmer in California and you want to know your crop quality, you can send us a sample and we'll do it for you as a free service. I think it's important for us to be able to understand what different types of wheats are being grown throughout California. And also we want to help you promote those varieties to whatever those are suitable. So we will basically tell you, we think this variety is better for ABC products, and that's our area of expertise. So I was thinking, we actually tested from way down south, Durham, Iraq, and also from Merced County with our grower John, which that variety is going to go to this farm to school program to make pasta. I'm in love with that variety. So I worked with Durham for many, many years, and I know very little about in general baking, but ask me anything about pasta quality and I'll tell you a lot of things because that's my area. And Durham, Iraq, it's such a beautiful grain. We have seen in both John and the other grower Morning Light down south that both of them had, so higher than 20% protein content was from John. And then I know Morning Light had also close to 20%. And I know they did minimum input, no fertilizer. And I think that's a variety that people should give it a try. The other one that I have fallen in love that has been grown in those two regions I'm talking about, in the region also where John is at, was with Walkerine. I actually like with Walkerine this time better than Sonora. And those two varieties are off PVP. And just to give you, if you ever want to connect with farmers, I think the best way for you guys to definitely start getting more into connecting with farmers, like you need to, call them, meet them in person and start a relationship with them. They're always, I feel like a lot more farmers now are looking into growing these specialty varieties, and they might grow 5-10 acres at a time first to see if it works for them, because it's a risk that they're taking, but they're willing to take a small risk right away until they see that a variety grows well. That's what John Eck did at Merced County. So you can connect with me, and also I will give you a resource here that we started last year. It's called the goldenstategrains.com. And I think that's a great resource because there you can find seed dealers. Specifically, I was talking to Monica Spiller yesterday. She sells some of the seed of these older varieties. In fact, John Eck was able to get these Durham, Iraq and with Walkerine from her. And I know she has done a great job of keeping that seed clean. And I know Allison is also starting to produce some of the seeds. So we're going to be producing more Rouge de Bordeaux, which that one is amazing as well. And
I
just
love it. I love it. I love your
yeah, just connect with us. And also what I would love to do, if you're ever interested, hey, I want to partner with a farmer, I can give you a list of many farmers that would like to partner with you. That's my job. But then your job is to actually call them up and establish the relationship. But I think today in California, if bakers are not partnering directly with the farmer, is because they just don't want to take that extra step that it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of education, and I get it. But I think our farmers are definitely willing to take the risk with you. You just need to establish that relationship with them, and I'm more than happy to help you with that process.
I also want to throw out there another soft wheat from Monica's Chittenden Blanc, which is
Yes.
that's a nice variety.
I think wheat Walker's a soft white too. Is it?
I think
Allison?
that's a hard.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think just the Chittenden is a soft. Monica can correct this.
Amazing.
Yeah, I could, if I chip in, they're hard or soft according to the agricultural conditions, really. And durum, of course, is the hardest of all wheats, but it doesn't perform the same way as a hard, quote, red wheat. So most of that strong gluten that you associate with hard is actually associated with the red wheats. Spelt is extremely soft and it behaves like a red wheat. It has that particular texture of bread that bakers really like. End of comment.
Thank you so much for your advice and your expertise. It really is very helpful. I also really love durum. I'm mostly a bread baker, and I think that durum as part of bread production, I think is really super fun. I'm excited to try the Wittwolkering and the Chittenden Blanc. I haven't heard of these. Ooh, who's putting in Akmalinka?
So that was actually David Keisel. And I was just going to put that in there so we can talk about it if you want to. And he or Monica can talk about those too.
I'm willing to actually make a comment on what I would choose for Southern California. First of all, they'd need to be spring types. Second would be a durum or a white wheat. And the what they're the criteria that matter. And then out of those, the super drought tolerant, all of them are drought tolerant to a point, but the durums are very drought tolerant. They have the reputation that provided you give them enough water while they're germinating and developing the first plant, they survive and come to fruition just on that water. You don't get a huge yield, but you get a crop. And the other thing is that for organic, you need a tall wheat. Some of the modern wheats, especially the ones that have come through breeders' hands, in the sense that they've been produced by crosses with short wheat. Those short wheats, if they're like Yokora Rojo, if it's grown in a droughty condition, it comes to fruition, yes, but it's so close to the ground that you can hardly harvest it. So you definitely need a wheat with good height. And those tall wheats are the old wheats that were popular before refined flour milling.
Yeah, if I could just say something about the tall wheats. When we do have a wet year, we get a lot of lodging in the tall wheats, especially if you do have fertile soil. And so that can be a huge issue for harvesting and for quality of the grain, because it's essentially lying on the ground.
Right.
So you need
So,
the straw strain.
yeah, so that's the tall wheats. If you plant them in the fall and you get a lot of rain through the winter, you get the risk of disease and you get lodging because they grow lushly. And
Yeah, so
it's that
spring-
character that allows for the drought tolerance. So if you can dare to plant a little later, but a little later doesn't apply in Southern California, I presume. I presume in Southern California, the winter is definitely quite warm. So you can plant in the fall and catch the rainfall that comes and go from there. But I was going to mention Acmalinca. Acmalinca is related to durums. So it's very prolific. It's Mapacha and Acmalinca. They're called turgidum wheats. And not many people grow them, but they're very prolific usually. They're very tall. And they're very drought tolerant. Anything that's going to be very tall is likely to be drought tolerant because that tallness when it is drought stressed means you still have a reasonable height left, if you know what I mean. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I can't even believe like all of this incredible information from the bakers and from Monica and from our farming partners. It's just incredible. I know that some people need to leave. We're not going to turn off the Zoom. We're going to keep on talking. I think that Allison is going to give us a short discussion about on-farm trials for our farmers. Everybody is allowed to partake. Avery and Clemence, thank you so much. One last thing, one very last thing. Tell us what you really want to see. Clemence and Avery. Avery, you go first.
I mean, we want to see everything. I mean, I think for me, my takeaway is I really want to get in touch with Claudia, with, I would like to I want to take what we've talked about today. I want to share this Zoom with my team. I want to, so it's not really, there isn't one thing I want to see. What I want to see is my team being able to follow along and engage with all of the information that was shared here, because I think that that's a big push for me, for the bakery, and for all of the things we're talking about, like how we raise the prices, how we connect with the farmers. It's about getting everybody to be passionate about it, not just the people who are on this call. But this call is really great. So it's like, how do I make these resources more connected to them, not just myself? I'm trying to grow a big company and big business. So I need a lot of people to be excited about it, not just myself. Otherwise, we're really not passing along our true education, our true passion to our team or the consumers. So yeah, so thank you for everybody for everything. I definitely will be sharing this Zoom with my team.
Thank you so much. Okay, Clemence, yours.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to see more of these flowers in more relatable retail areas. I think we're such a small niche group using these flowers, and there's such an opportunity for wider distribution, which I think is going to require more mills, more volume, and I think it can be done without compromising quality. I think we're at a point where consumers are understanding the difference in price point and quality. And so I want to see more of this readily available outside of like cool farmers markets and little niche stores.
Totally agree. I don't know if you guys know about that supermarket up in Canada that has a mill on site, but I mean, that is just a dream. It's just an incredible dream to be able to have that. Thank you both to the bakers and to Allison and to Claudia. Allison is going to give us a little thing about the farm trials, which I think is just awesome. Thank you so much for sticking around. Everybody is totally welcome to stick.
I'm gonna have to jump off myself. I've gotta work with the team on some croissant issues. So,
Amazing.
but yeah, but I will tune back in because this next piece will be recorded as well. Great.
Yeah.
And then you guys will be emailing the link to us. Wonderful.
Yeah.
It was so nice to meet you guys, all of you, and see some familiar faces as well. Melissa, thank you guys for all your hard work.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Okay, Allison, your show.
Yeah, so let's see who's still on here. Okay, cool, Nate and Rachel. So we had talked at the Green Extravaganza a bit about trying to get some more trials. And so Rachel, I talked to you about Mendocino maybe, and then Nate down in SoCal. So Rachel, you have plot size equipment, right? Like a plot planter, plot combine. Oh, you're on mute.
We have a plot combine, and I am pretty sure we have access to a 4-foot seed drill, but I would have to get it from someone. I haven't used it, but but I think the other thing we could potentially do is use our, I can't remember now if it's 8-foot or 10-foot off the top of my head, seed drill to, we have the capacity to divide that and plant half of.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think Jared, that's what you guys have done before, right?
Yep.
Cool. Oh, hi, Jared.
Hi, Rachel.
So the on-farm trials, it sounds like we're super successful this year. Everybody had a rough year.
Yeah, it wasn't just trials. It was just all week.
Well, yeah, it'd be great if we could get these, other 2 locations to kind of cover California. So is that something you think we could do maybe this fall, Rachel, up at Mendocino?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, no, I mean, I think for me, it's just kind of logistically talking through.
Yeah, oh, you're present. Yeah, I think, we could get together the varieties and the seed, and help out, with the planting and stuff. We have students. I don't know if she can hear me because she's frozen. But yeah, so Nate, what about, you were saying there's a UC station or a Cal Poly station by you?
There's a UC station here in Shafter, the old cotton research station that's got some space. We could also, between the Central Coast kind of Grain Growers Alliance, I imagine there'd probably be 3 or 4 people, maybe a lot more actually, who'd be interested in something like that. What are your kind of the parameters? What's the size, the usual protocol, things like that?
Jared, do you want to take that? He's kind of running the on-farm trials.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's debatable in terms of what is the most functional for everyone here. I think that, the way that we approached it last time around was because there's so many potential things to look at between the elite Davis varieties, between these off-patent varieties. We may, be able to get more heritage grains. The list can be really, really long, and it would be overwhelming, I think, for most people to grow all of those and then harvest all those and, measure them. And so the way that we had done it last time was we had kind of 2 what we called check varieties that were just going to be ones that everyone would commit to growing everywhere. So that way we'd be able to compare. And then otherwise from that, you have a menu that you could choose from out of the longer list of varieties that you'd grow. And then the way that, again, like kind of for on-farm trials, partly for seed, partly for the fact that we wanted to make this accessible. The plot sizes were small. I believe we went with like 4-row 10-foot plots. So very, something that could be, hand harvested and processed if need be. That being said, if you have access to, plot size equipment and, have the ability to do more, having at least a couple of anchor sites, I guess, where, more of the varieties are being grown, or there's the ability to actually replicate the trials, because the way that we had done it before is we'd only replicated, meaning planting, a variety in more than one place in the field. We'd only asked to replicate the Czech varieties. So each site was planting each of the Czech varieties twice in the field, but otherwise everything else was only being planted once. But if we had kind of a more, capacity between equipment and time and labor, for a couple of sites to be able to actually, do replicated trials. The nice thing with that is just, if things are, if the field is variable, if things go wrong, you're just a little more likely that we'll still get something good out of it. So that's the way that we approached it in this past time around. But as Allison said, I think looking back at the people that participated, I only really got information back from Polly Goldman, and I know, some, I know some of you had, I think many of us had challenges this year in growing, and so, that, hopefully we'll be, fingers crossed we have a better season, but also just wanting to think about if there's ways in which the trial design could be set up to make it easier for everyone. Sometimes the flip side of having really small plots is that they're just so not in sync with the rest of your production that it's, kind of a hassle and a side thing that is a challenge to manage. So anyway, so I think that the moral story is I think that we can revise. We had a plan last year. I think it's got a lot of flexibility in it already, but I think we can be, continue to be flexible depending on what works best for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's where, we can help out if we do have folks with plot size equipment, and we do what's kind of called like hen and chicks, where we have these bigger field trials with more varieties, and then farmers from that area can go look at them and they can select, 3 or 4 varieties they want to test the following year. That would be really helpful just to be able to trial more varieties. So Nate, you have plot size equipment, or?
We do. We have 2 between the group. Melissa actually has a brand spanking new, well, a little bit used, but a really fun little 3-foot combine, Chinese one. So it's not doesn't have any screening capacity. It's just a thresher, kind of a very rough thresher, and then it's just air cleaned effectively. So it's not going to be, and the air cleaning is also very, very rudimentary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got an identical one to that down in
Molly Engelhart.
LA area. Yeah, Molly Englehart's at Sohart Farm in Fillmore. So between the collective, there's those 2. I have several all crop 66s, 60s and 66s that could be used also. We have a grain binder that we could bring into the equation. I think it's about a 60 or 70 inch. So we've got a lot of harvest capacity. It's the planting capacity that we're going to need to be kind of creative with.
Because we don't really have a smaller seed drill, do we?
Not officially yet. We are hopefully going to have one. That's part of our afternoon discussion.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the other piece of it too, I guess I should go through and do an inventory, and Allison, I guess, and if Maya's going to have some seed of just like how much seed, we actually have for these trials, because if, once we start talking about even, plot planters or, 8-foot planters, there's just a certain amount of minimum seed that those things need to run effectively. And we may not have enough, depending on how many sites we're talking about to
Yeah, maybe we could plan for, next year. If we have some varieties, we can do increases here with, it'd be treated seed like in the conventional field in order to send it out. But yeah, if we can narrow down some varieties that we want to do increases of and then have those at trials next year, that would probably give us some more time to kind of plan and get everything together, get equipment together, see what we can do.
Do you guys have a drill that could be moved around? Because I'm up and down the state, and I could rationalize moving that between sites if that's helpful.
We do. If you have a 3-point hitch, we have one we just forklift into the back of a truck, and then you could put it on a tractor. Yeah, it depends. If we're using it at the time, right? We have 2 plot drills, so that could definitely be an option depending on like when we're planting.
I was commenting. I've got an Oyards plot drill from OSU that
That's right.
I'm happy to lend to the cause, and it does. Yeah, it seems to work pretty well, as far as I can tell. It's old but functional, and it's portable. I mean, as long as you have a trailer, you can drive. It's a self-driving one, so. But it sits around here most of the time. So if I'm not using it, would love to have it used.
A lot of what we're doing with this Central Coast, the meeting we just had with the Central Coast gang is logistics coordination. So I can just start up a thread about when setting dates on the calendar and just figure out how feasible it is to get certain pieces of equipment to the right spots at the right time.
Sure.
Nate, we've got a lot of homework. As
Yeah.
always. As always.
Right. I'm good at plagiarizing though. So how do you think I got through college? Come on, Melissa. Cut and paste. That's all we have to do.
Yeah, I think find out too, like what your farmers want to see.
I'll just add that
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't know. I mean, I imagine that Allison, as you have access to some sort of appropriate scale seed cleaning, but we would potentially be able to help in that. Sit around, David. I have this like small clipper that's like bigger than the Jared that are in the I forget what they're called, but the like seed equipment share. It's bigger than that one, but it's smaller than my really big clipper. I think it would be pretty appropriate for cleaning plot size. And one thing that's nice about it is it's so small, you can really assure that there's no cross-contamination of varieties.
Yeah, that would be good for, when we send stuff up for the wheat commission then to do testing on that.
Sure.
Needs to be fairly clean. Yeah, we have the smut issue we've been talking about as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about that in terms of, it seems like, yeah, there's lots of logistics to think about, but one of them is what we did last year to minimize there's no good perfect answer for loose smut in seed. But one of the things that we did was we would try and hot water treat the seed before it went out to planting. The challenge of that is that one, it does limit the lot size that, for the planting stock. And the other is that the vigor and germination drops off pretty quickly after it gets hot water treated. So it's like it requires, kind of some just in time type seed shipping where it's like, when you're going to be planting and seed comes to you and you're able to plant it, pretty directly after. We tried to plant a trial up at Upper Lake this year, and it was, a few weeks after the hot water treatment happened, and the germ was definitely pretty poor.
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking, if we know what we want to trial, we can put in some treated seed increases here. And then I think that we haven't seen any smut in that stuff, so I think that might be our best bet. And then, yeah, so we're trying this other thing with the seed from this year that's going for quality testing. We're washing it, and it seems to be working well. You know, basically the smut grains float along with a bunch of weed seeds, so it cleans it pretty well. I think we're going to try a few things this year in our field site that we know, you know, has some smut in it, that we can do some different treatments and see how well those work with, you know, germination and with controlling it. We have a bucket of smutty seed we can use for that. So Monica mentioned maybe using a little bit of detergent in the washing.
Is there any way that could be standardized in terms of the process and the equipment so that we could have the seed down here and clean it just before planting? Because I'm really worried that we won't be able to be timely about that given our heavy reliance on rainfall and just extenuating circumstances.
I mean, Allison can talk to the washing. The hot water treatment is pretty straightforward, especially if you all already kind of have access to kitchen equipment to be able to make a hot water bath. You know, again, it depends on the scale of the amount of seed that you're planting, but for, you know, smaller quantities, it's really kind of just a two-step hot water, you know, where you soak it for longer at a lower temp and then for like 10 minutes at a warmer temperature. And it's just a matter of being able to keep an accurate, to make that water temperature pretty exact during that soak. So, you know, some people use like, you know, a sous vide type, you know, set up for it, but you can also just do it by adding, you know, hot water and having an accurate thermometer. I'm happy to send the protocols, and they are pretty, you know, pretty doable, you know, especially for all of you that kind of might have connections to kitchens.
Cool. Okay.
Great. Well, yeah, let's keep this conversation going. I think we'll need to get together, you know, what varieties we want to look at, if we need to do increases of those, and then, you know, what sort of equipment we can get. And then, so let's plan for maybe next fall, we can do these trials. We'll see. And then, so yeah, Nate, if you could find some, like a farmer or somebody we can put land on, or put a trial on, or the UC station there. I don't know. I'm not sure what it is. Do you know what the name of it is?
I've always just heard of the Cotton Research Station.
Cotton Research Station.
Shafter Cotton Research Station.
What town is it in?
Shafter. Shafter.
Shafter. Okay. Never heard of that. Cool. Yeah, that would be great. And I think we have some funds for almond trials, right, Jared? Yeah. So we
Yeah,
can,
that's correct, through the SCOPE project.
cover
Mhm.
that sort of thing. And then we have students that we can send for labor.
Hey.
So just to be clear, we're talking about not necessarily aiming for anything this fall. We're looking at the fall of 2022.
I think we would need some more planning. Seems like this might be too quick, but it'll be good. We can get some increases going on seed varieties we want to see, because it may be totally different varieties you want to see up in Mendocino versus down in SoCal, right?
Also, I think it would be helpful if you guys had, I mean, do you have any target areas that you want to cover, or that you want to do some research for in terms of region? Like, are you looking for a coastal climate? Are you looking for something a little bit more inland?
I guess that depends on where the interested farmers are, right? Where they want to grow. If we have coastal farmers that are interested in coastal varieties, that could be a good place to look at. I know they have some different challenges on the coast.
Yes, we do. Okay, great. That's really good to know. Thanks. Thank you guys so much. So
All right.
this could just be its own lunch and learn, this the field trial. Do we have anything else? Anybody else with any other questions?
Yeah, this is Karan here. I have a quick question. Like, so in general, like how did Sonora did in the last season for every farmer? Do we have any statistical data for that?
Claudia, I think can at least give a preliminary answer on that, right?
So we received the crop once has been harvested. I believe Sonora for this farmer produced typical Sonora yield, which I think it's, and Allison, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I heard less than 1,000 pounds an acre. So, but I don't know exactly the yield for this farmer. But the crop for this specific farmer, the protein content, again, which I'm just saying because everybody likes to hear that, it was actually in Sonora. Usually it's a low protein content, but this one we had it at 17%. So definitely you can see the drought stress that he only irrigated twice. I think, I mean, I'm as a researcher, I would never say this is the entire California Sonora crop because it depends where it was grown. Mm-hmm. And if you are in the northern side, maybe you had a Sonora that was lower protein. If you had, especially on the coast, maybe that you had maybe a little bit, maybe rain. But Allison, how was your crop, your Sonora from the on-trial farms, at least at the farm, a student farm in the Rosso Ranch?
Yeah, so it wasn't included in the variety testing, but just the trials or just the increase we put in. But we had it in 2018 and 2019, and it was about 2,000 pounds per acre. We had yield there, and average protein is about 10, which is what you normally see, I think, in Sonora. With like a nice plump grain, like the 17 protein, the grain is very like shriveled and small. So it's, more protein, less starch. But generally, yeah, I'd say a lot of farmers I've talked to, if they get 1,000 pounds per acre, like that's a good yield from Sonora, which is pretty bad.
Okay. So is there a database that we can update, like say, for example, like whatever I have grown in San Martin here this year? So I have a pretty good data on that. Like I would like to share that information with every farmer. So is there a database that I can update?
No, but that would be a really good thing to add.
I mean, this is mostly to share the observations that I had. Like, I mean, I did like 4 varieties and then the winner was Sonora. There's no doubt about it. And I was quite impressed the way it was grown. And as you said, like it varies region to region. And so, I mean, as we compare things, like if the same plot, like the same 1 acre, like I have planted like 4 varieties. And I did see a big difference in the Sonora in the drought. And I did measure the rainfall, like it was just 4 inch.
That's what we got.
Yeah, with 4 inch, I did see the plant like almost shoot like 4.5 feet to 5 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to send some samples to the Wheat Commission if they can analyze the protein content and other things there.
Yeah, so I was pulling out here because I talked to Allison. I think we have a great tool and resource for farmers that if they want to check information every year. Allison, I asked her, and we compile data every year or an average of 3 to 5 years. We can add it in this website and have some sort of a link that takes people to a PDF or an Excel sheet that talks about that specific variety, agronomics and how it performs.
Yes.
Here we do kind of say it in yields an average 500 to 3,500 pounds, but I think the information you're saying, it will be critical to have a much more, and then also Allison and these other on-farm trials that we can add here. So I would say your first contact to share this kind of information will be Allison. But then I would definitely love to see, you can send those samples to me for quality, and then we can add that to the data that Allison is compiling.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is mostly like, I mean, at least for the small farmers, like if we can have access to the database and then they can update with all the information and the procedures that they followed, that will be very helpful for the new farmers or like other farming community to get into this.
Yeah. So Claudia, that's something they could put onto Go and See Grains, like he can upload his farm, what he grew,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, so
conditions.
So
there
other,
is-
yeah. One more question I had is that like, I mean, I did hear like, I mean, there was some conversation on the grain infrastructure things. So is there any funding from the Wheat Commission or like any loans or anything to the farming community to have a grain infrastructure? Because as a small farmers, like it's very hard to build a complete grain infrastructure. And I think as far as I know, like most of the small farmers are still struggling to keep up with the infrastructure. So at least on the grain side, like given the prices and all, like the grain infrastructure is really missing in California.
So we don't give any grants to farmers specifically, and we do more to researchers who work with farmers. And so that's not kind of like our area of, you know, that we spend, I guess, our funds as part of our mission. So it's more the part of the research, but it has to go through some sort of researcher or a research institution. And then if we do, the way I see it, or our law will say, is that that's a conflict of interest if we start funding specifically farmers. But you can definitely work with Allison through, you know, they get grants and they get funding. And you can be one of the partners. Now, I do have to make a point that CDFA does provide grants to farmers specifically. And CDFA just released a bunch of funding, right? I saw it yesterday, and they are providing it for, like, you know, there's just so much. And I can definitely send you that information that I got, and you can see where you might fit in, and then that you can apply to those grants. I think more.
But Claudia, I think CDFA doesn't, wheat isn't one of the crops that CDFA funds.
But there are certain, isn't it? There's certain, like, for example, the Farm to School grant program. Farmer can apply to that, and a farmer can actually purchase equipment with that grant. Now, it has to be specific that you're working with schools, but there might be some grants that are actually to not crop specific, I guess I would say. There are the specialty, there's the specialty grants, specialty crops. Yeah, that one you cannot apply for wheat, but I think there are other ones that he might be able to apply for.
There's also Western SARE has
yeah.
Or like maybe as a group, like as we collectively start something, because this is something I always pitch in most of the meetings, that to have a collective or like have a small co-op kind of. I think that's what I think we all need to share something into that direction, because I mean, putting a grain infrastructure is not that easy. I mean, yes, I mean, since I was working on this for last 12 years now, and it's hard. It's not a easy commodity or something that we can grow and sell it. I mean, is there any group that we can have initiative that, like maybe as a group we come together and then have a seed funding, and then maybe we can go from there.
Well, that's why I think, Nate, your group, you kind of have a group working on that, and then there's Rachel's group, right? You guys are kind of, you know, farmer cooperatives, or.
I mean, that said, like that as a farming cooperative, like we can get the bakers, retail stores, farmers, infrastructure, everything. I mean, because right now, like we're all like working independently, like everyone has its own market, but this effort is not going anywhere. If you really look at the data that we had in the last 15 or 20 years, I mean, there are many farmers trying this and then they give up. And I've seen this, like, I mean, since, and we have seen big farmers trying the heritage grains and they don't see a market for it. And this is all going, I mean, it's a good cause. And I mean, we will see this going into the drought cycles. I think California is hitting a big drought cycle. So I think we have to do something now. And maybe like, I don't know, like who takes, maybe Nate or someone, like maybe we should jump in and then have some seed money from all the farmers or like whoever is interested, and to start some kind of a group or like a co-op where like we can start. I think it's time to start. I think I strongly believe that we should start something in that, because as you said, like there is no grants or like anything from the government or from any other organizations. I think as a farmers, as a bakers, I think we should do something in this regard. It's a high time. That's what I mean to say.
So our cooperative is pretty regionally based here, where we share farming equipment and resources. We're really just getting going. But one of the things that Nate and I are going to be doing, if you're going to be at Eco Farm this year, Nate and I are going to be on a panel discussing setting up cooperatives and sharing resources with other farmers. And I think that would be super helpful. We've gotten a lot of interest in our little effort here. A lot of our work so far has been funded by some local grants from some local nonprofits, which we've been terribly grateful for. And in some ways, there is a lot, one of the reasons that we went very local and that we gave it a geographic reference was because sharing equipment really has its limits when you're talking about geography. And it was the sharing of equipment that seemed central to motivating all the players. So that is one of the places that I would look, but definitely look up in the, I don't know if the Eco Farm catalog and schedule have been published yet, but definitely look us up there because Nate and I are actually going to be talking about this very thing and about setting it up and about the pitfalls and what we're running into.
Okay, thank you.
Just real quick point, you can look in the chat, but there's I pasted a couple links, and so did Claudia, to possible grant spots, including I pasted in for the value added producer grants and rural business development grants, and
Amazing.
Claudia pointed the CDFA grants.
Okay. Oh yes, the FSA microloan. Oh Lord. Okay. How do I save that? Nope. Okay. Are we good, guys?
Yeah, thanks for hosting this, Melissa.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Claudia and Nate, for not letting
Thanks,
the ball get
everyone.
totally dropped. We're going to do a similarly topic, or rather a similar type of format, I think, with a different topic. And we'll just keep you all on the email. And if you want to join in or see what we're doing or see what we're talking about, you guys will get an email.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Rachel, I think we're going to hit you up specifically to talk on the next one, Rachel. You dodged a bullet this time.
You did. Can't dodge it forever. With great power comes great responsibility.
Broadband, right?
Okay.
We are going to have to get you a better connection, though.
Yeah, for sure.
You
Thank
guys.
you so much.
See you guys.
Bye.